What if the perfect life was the perfect lie? Tonight we pull back the curtain on Amelia and Julian Thorne, the city's golden couple. He was a millionaire real estate magnate. She was his beautiful pregnant wife. At the most prestigious charity gala of the year, in front of hundreds of people and flashing cameras, he gave a speech. But it wasn't to honor his wife, it was to destroy her. He called her a liar, a cheat, and cast her out with nothing. But he never counted on one man watching from the shadows, a security guard who knew his darkest secrets. This isn't just a story of betrayal, it's the story of a spectacular downfall. Stay with us. The penthouse apartment on Park Avenue was less a home and more a statement. Spanning the top 2 floors of a skyscraper, Julian Thorne himself had built it, offered a panoramic God's-eye view of Manhattan. The windows were vast, spotless sheets of glass, and at night the city lights became a glittering carpet laid out at their feet. For Amelia Hayes now, Amelia Thorne. For the past 3 years, it had once felt like living inside a diamond. Now 7 months pregnant, it often felt like the most beautiful prison in the world. Amelia traced the rim of her water glass, the condensation cool against her fingertips. Across the 10-foot marble dining table, Julian was a study in controlled power. His dark hair was impeccably styled. His custom-tailored Tom Ford suit showed no sign of the day's wear, and his steel blue eyes were fixed on his tablet, scrolling through market reports. The Starlight Foundation Gala is tomorrow night. Amelia said, her voice soft, trying to breach the chasm of silence that had grown between them in recent months. I had my final dress fitting. It's a custom Serafina, pale lavender. I thought it would be lovely for the... She trailed off. Don't point, Julian said without looking up. It's unbecoming. Amelia's hand, which had gestured vaguely towards her swollen belly, dropped to her lap. Sorry. I just meant for the baby. He finally lifted his gaze, and the chill in his eyes was more profound than the air-conditioned breeze wafting from the vents. Everything is about the baby now, isn't it? Your conversations, your clothes, your moods. He set the tablet down with a sharp click. Remember when your world revolved around me? Amelia. The question was a quiet accusation, a polished stone thrown with perfect aim. She remembered. She remembered being an ambitious, bright-eyed art curator at a small but respected gallery. She remembered Julian Thorne sweeping in to purchase a controversial modern piece, but his real interest was clearly in her. He was devastatingly charming, relentless in his pursuit. He'd showered her with attention praise and a lifestyle she'd only read about in magazines. He had made her world revolve around him, and she had done so gladly. Of course I do, Julian, she replied, forcing a smile. I love you. This baby is an extension of that love. For us, is it? He leaned back, steepling his fingers. Or is it a distraction, a new project for you to curate now that you've given up your career? The barb hit its mark. Giving up her job hadn't been a choice. Not really. It had been a slow erosion orchestrated by Julian. First, it was gentle suggestions that she didn't need to work. Then came complaints about her late hours, the unseemly artists she associated with, and finally the grand gesture of buying the gallery and gifting it to a non-profit, effectively making her position redundant. He had framed it as an act of love, freeing her to live a life of leisure. She now understood it as an act of possession. The gala will be wonderful, she said, changing the subject. Your speech is the main event. Everyone is so excited to hear about the new children's wing you're funding. They should be. he said, his arrogance returning like a familiar cloak. Thorne Sterling. Properties is setting a new standard for corporate philanthropy. It's all about image, Amelia. Perception. You should remember that. Tomorrow night, you are not just my wife. You are a reflection of my success. I expect you to look perfect to be perfect. No emotional displays. Just smiles. Understood. Understood. She whispered the word, tasting like ash. Later that night, as she lay in their cavernous bedroom, Julian was already asleep, a portrait of serene indifference. Amelia placed a hand on her belly, feeling the gentle flutter of the life within her. This baby, a little boy they had decided to name Oliver, was her anchor in this turbulent, lonely sea. He was the only thing that felt truly real in her life of curated perfection. She thought of the early days of Julian's passionate declarations and grand romantic gestures. Where had that man gone? He had been replaced by this cold, calculating stranger who measured her worth in public appearances and silent obedience. The change had been so gradual, she'd almost missed it, like the tide slowly pulling away from the shore, leaving her stranded. A wave of anxiety washed over her. Tomorrow was the Starlight Foundation Gala, the biggest social event of the season. Julian's company was the primary sponsor. All eyes would be on them. Just smiles, he had said. She closed her eyes, practicing the expression in the darkness, feeling like a mask was being fused to her skin. She had a terrible sinking feeling about tomorrow night, a premonition as cold and sharp as the look in her husband's eyes. She just didn't know how right she was. The grand ballroom of the Astoria was a breathtaking spectacle of old-world opulence. Crystal chandeliers, each the size of a small car, dripped light onto the city's elite. The air hummed with polite chatter, the clinking of champagne flutes, and the soft strains of a string quartet. It smelled of money, a heady mix of expensive perfume, floral arrangements, and ambition. Amelia felt like a doll on display. Her lavender Serafina gown flowed gracefully over her pregnancy, and the Thorne diamonds encircling her neck felt heavier than usual, like a collar. Julian was at her side, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. He was in his element, a king holding court. He greeted business tycoons, city officials and socialites with a dazzling smile and a firm handshake, introducing Amelia with a proud flourish. "My beautiful wife, Amelia. She's my inspiration," he'd say, and the crowd would coo in admiration. It was a perfectly rehearsed performance. For the first hour, Amelia played her part. She smiled until her cheeks ached, murmured pleasantries, and laughed at jokes that weren't funny. But a knot of dread was tightening in her stomach. Julian's touch felt like ice, and his smiles never quite reached his eyes when he looked at her. It was during a conversation with Mayor Thompson that she first saw her. The woman was striking tall, with a mane of raven hair, wearing a blood-red dress that clung to her like a second skin. She was standing near the edge of Julian's circle, her gaze fixed on him with an intensity that was far from professional. Amelia recognized her from a company newsletter, Isabella Rossi, the new VP of Acquisitions at Thorne Sterling, a prodigy Julian had personally headhunted from a rival firm. When Julian's eyes met Isabella's over the mayor's shoulder, a silent, charged current passed between them. It was a fleeting look, almost imperceptible, but to Amelia it was as loud as a scream. It was a look of shared secrets of intimacy. In that instant, the vague anxieties she'd been nursing for months coalesced into a sickening certainty. Her breath hitched. Julian, sensing her sudden stiffness, squeezed her back painfully. "Darling, are you all right?" he asked, his voice a silken threat. "You look a little pale." "I'm fine," she managed to say, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Just a little warm." As the evening wore on, the evidence mounted in a series of small, excruciating moments. Julian, excusing himself only for Amelia to see Isabella slip out of the ballroom moments later. A shared glance across the room that lingered too long. The way Isabella's hand brushed his arm when she returned a gesture of casual ownership. Amelia felt the room begin to spin. She needed air. Excusing herself, she made her way through the throng towards the terrace. Outside the cool night air was a relief. She leaned against the stone balustrade, looking down at the city lights that once seemed so magical. Now they just looked like a million lonely, disconnected points. From the shadows at the far end of the terrace, a man stepped forward. He was dressed in the crisp black uniform of the event's security staff. He was tall and broad-shouldered with a stern, impassive face and a neatly trimmed beard. "Mrs. Thorne," he said, his voice a low, steady baritone. "Apologies for startling you. Just making my rounds. Are you feeling okay?" "Yes, thank you." "I'm fine," she said, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. The guard, whose name tag read Marcus Vance, hesitated for a moment. He looked back towards the ballroom doors, then back at her. There was a flicker of something in his eyes. Pity, perhaps, or something harder, like resolve. "It's a great event," he said, his tone professional, yet carrying an undercurrent of meaning. "Mr. Thorne is a very generous man. He likes to put on a good show." The emphasis on the word show was unmistakable. Amelia looked at him. Truly looked at him for the first time. He wasn't just a uniform. He was a man. And he was seeing her not the millionaire's wife, but a woman on the verge of breaking. Before she could respond, the ballroom doors opened again, and Julian appeared, his face a mask of thunder. "There you are," he snapped, his voice low and vicious. "What are you doing out here, fraternizing with the help?" "Get back inside. It's time for my speech." He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her skin. He gave Marcus a dismissive, contemptuous glare, as if swatting away a fly, and pulled Amelia back into the glittering cage of the ballroom. As she was dragged away, her eyes met Marcus's one last time. In that brief, silent exchange, she felt an unspoken promise pass between them. "I see what's happening. You are not alone." It was a thought she would cling to, like a lifeline in the devastating moments to come. The ballroom fell into a hushed, anticipatory silence as Julian Thorne strode onto the stage. A single brilliant spotlight followed him to the podium, which bore the crest of the Starlight Foundation. He looked magnificent, a titan of industry and philanthropy, the embodiment of power and grace. He placed his hands on the sides of the lectern and scanned the adoring crowd, his gaze finally landing on Amelia at their front row table. He smiled, but this time it was a predator's smile. "Thank you," he began, his voice resonating through the hall, rich and confident. "Thank you all for being here tonight to support such a worthy cause. The Starlight Foundation does incredible work for children, and Thorne Sterling Properties is immensely proud to partner with them." He spoke for several minutes about corporate responsibility, about building a better future, about the new children's wing his donation would fund. It was the speech everyone expected, filled with polished platitudes and self-congratulation. Amelia sat ramrod straight, her hands clenched in her lap, the lavender fabric of her dress feeling like a shroud. Every word he spoke felt like a lie. But philanthropy, like business, is also about truth. Julian continued, his tone shifting subtly, becoming sharper, more personal. It's about integrity. It's about building on a foundation of honesty. And lately I've been forced to examine the foundations of my own life. A confused murmur rippled through the audience. This was not in the program. Julian's eyes cold and hard as diamonds were locked on Amelia. "We all wear masks," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial hush that drew everyone in. "We present the face we want the world to see. A successful businessman, a happy couple." He paused for dramatic effect. "A faithful, loving wife." Amelia's blood ran cold. The air left her lungs. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not now. For months I have been living a lie. Julian announced, his voice ringing with false anguish. "I have stood by a woman who has betrayed the sacred vows of our marriage." Gasps erupted around the room. The flashes of cameras, once sporadic, became a blinding, frantic strobe. Every phone was now raised, recording. Amelia felt hundreds of pairs of eyes turning towards her, their gazes a mixture of shock, pity, and cruel curiosity. I wanted to believe it wasn't true. Julian went on a master actor playing the victim. I ignored the late-night texts, the secretive phone calls, the emotional distance. I told myself it was hormones, the stress of the pregnancy. He then delivered the killing blow, his voice breaking with practiced sorrow. But I can no longer deny the truth. I have definitive proof that my wife Amelia has been unfaithful. And worse, there is a very real possibility that the child she is carrying is not mine. A collective horrified gasp sucked the air from the room. The world tilted on its axis. The accusation was so monstrous, so utterly baseless, that Amelia couldn't even process it. It was a nuclear bomb, detonated in the center of her life, and she was at ground zero. Tears she hadn't realized were forming streamed down her face. She looked at Julian, pleading with her eyes for him to stop, to take back this insane public vivisection of her soul. But he just stared back, his expression one of cold, triumphant finality. He had created his narrative. He had painted her as the villain to preemptively destroy her before she could ever expose him. So tonight he concluded, his voice swelling with righteous indignation. "While I still pledge my company's donation to the foundation, my personal life requires a demolition. I am publicly announcing my separation from Amelia Thorne. She will be leaving my home tonight with nothing but the clothes on her back, the same way she came into my life." He stepped away from the podium to thunderous, confused applause from some and stunned silence from others. The social execution was complete. Whispers followed her like a plague as she stumbled to her feet, her legs threatening to give out. The scandal, I never trusted her. Poor Julian. She fled. Pushing past waiters, bumping into stunned guests, she ran from the ballroom, from the cameras, from the life that had just been so brutally annihilated. She burst through the main doors and into the chaotic swirl of the hotel lobby. Her mind, a maelstrom of pain and disbelief. She didn't know where to go or what to do. She had no money, no phone. Julian had insisted she leave it in the car, and no one to call. He had isolated her so perfectly. She collapsed onto a velvet bench near a darkened corridor, her body racked with sobs, her hands protectively clutching the baby he had just disowned in front of the world. She was ruined, utterly and completely ruined. The lobby of the Astoria was a blur of judgment. Bellhops averted their gazes, and elegantly dressed patrons whispered behind their hands as Amelia sat a broken figure in a lavender gown. Each tick of the grandfather clock in the hall sounded like a hammer blow counting down the seconds of her public disgrace. She felt stripped bare, every ounce of her dignity flayed away by Julian's calculated cruelty. Her world hadn't just collapsed. It had been incinerated, and he was the one holding the match. Just as she was sinking into a dark abyss of despair, a solid presence appeared beside her. Mrs. Thorne. It was the security guard from the terrace, Marcus Vance. His face was grim, his eyes devoid of the pity she'd seen from others. Instead, they held a quiet intensity, a steady resolve that cut through the fog of her grief. "You need to come with me," he said, his voice low and firm, meant for her ears alone. "You can't stay here. His personal security team will be down in a minute, and their instructions will be to remove you from the property. Forcefully, if necessary." Amelia looked up at him, her tear-filled eyes questioning. Why would he help her? He was an employee. Risking his job for her was madness. Why she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Because what he did up there was wrong," Marcus said, a muscle clenching in his jaw. "And because I know he's lying." His words were a lifeline. Someone believed her. A complete stranger believed her over the powerful, charismatic Julian Thorne. A tiny spark of Fight One, she thought, had been extinguished forever, flickered within her. He helped her to her feet, his hand a steadying presence on her elbow. "There's a service exit this way. It leads to the staff parking area. My car is there. I can get you out of here before the media descends." She nodded numbly and let him guide her away from the opulent lobby, down a sterile, fluorescent-lit corridor, smelling of disinfectant and leftover food. It was a jarring transition from the world of champagne and chandeliers to the building's unseen underbelly. It felt symbolic of her own fall from grace. In the quiet solitude of his unassuming sedan, a grey Honda Civic that felt like a sanctuary after the Thornes' fleet of black Bentleys, Amelia finally broke down completely. The sobs were violent, shaking her entire body. Marcus remained silent, letting her grieve. He simply passed her a small box of tissues from his glove compartment and a bottle of water. He didn't offer platitudes or empty reassurances. He offered a quiet, respectful presence, which was more comforting than any words could have been. After her tears subsided into ragged breaths, he finally spoke. "My sister worked for Thorne Sterling Properties." He began, his eyes fixed on the rain-streaked windshield. She was a project manager. Smart, dedicated. A few years ago, she discovered some irregularities in the bidding process for a city contract. Materials being billed but never delivered. Safety inspections being falsified. He paused, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. She took her concerns to Julian Thorne, directly thinking he'd want to know that he'd fix it. He smiled, thanked her for her diligence, and fired her the next day for gross incompetence. He blacklisted her. She couldn't get a job in the industry for over a year. It nearly broke her. "I took this security job to keep an eye on him, to wait for a chance to see him get what he deserves." Amelia stared at him, stunned. Julian wasn't just a cheat, he was a crook, a man who destroyed lives without a second thought. "He accused me," he said. She couldn't bring herself to repeat the vile accusation. "I know what he said." Marcus cut in his voice hard. "It's a classic narcissist's move. It's called a preemptive strike. He knew you were aware of his affair with Isabella Rossi, so he created a bigger, more shocking scandal with you at the center to discredit anything you might ever say about him. He controls the narrative. He always controls the narrative. It made a terrifying kind of sense. Julian hadn't just humiliated her out of spite. It was a strategic move to ensure his own protection. "I've been gathering things," Marcus said, reaching into the back seat and pulling a thick manila envelope onto his lap. "Small things. Things that wouldn't be missed. It's not much, but it's a start." He opened the envelope and handed her a document. It was a printout of the keycard access logs for the executive floor at Thorne Sterling Tower for the past 6 months. He had highlighted specific entries. Dozens of them. Isabella Rossi's card accessing the floor after 10 p.m. Julian Thorne's card accessing the floor minutes later. Them both leaving together in the early hours of the morning. Next, he showed her a photograph, slightly grainy, taken from a security camera feed he wasn't supposed to have access to. It showed Julian and Isabella in a heated, intimate embrace in the underground parking garage. The date stamp was from 3 nights ago. The evidence was irrefutable. It was cold, hard proof of the affair she had only suspected in her heart. Seeing it laid out like that was a fresh wave of pain, but underneath it, something else was stirring anger. A cold, clear, burning rage. What he said about the baby. Amelia's voice trembled, but this time with fury, not sorrow. "He will not get away with that. I don't care what he does to me, but he will not take my son's name. He will not brand him a lie before he is even born." Marcus looked at her, and for the first time he allowed a small, grim smile. "Good," he said, "because what I have here is enough to prove the affair. But I have a feeling that's just the tip of the iceberg. Julian Thorne built an empire on lies. You and I are going to pull the cornerstone out from under it." In the anonymous darkness of a parking garage, surrounded by the scent of gasoline and rain, an alliance was forged. The discarded wife and the watchful guard. They didn't have Julian's money or his power, but they had something he had long since forgotten the truth, and they were going to use it to burn his gilded world to the ground. The next few days were a blur of clandestine meetings and careful planning. Marcus secured Amelia a room in a modest extended-stay hotel far from the glittering heart of Manhattan, registering her under his sister's name, Sarah Vance. The anonymity was both a comfort and a stark reminder of how far she had fallen. Her face had been plastered across every tabloid and gossip site, accompanied by headlines screaming Thorne's betrayal, and the $1 million baby scandal. Julian's PR machine was working overtime, painting him as the tragic, wronged husband. In their drab hotel room, which they'd turned into a makeshift command center, Amelia and Marcus pored over the evidence. The keycard logs and the photo were damning proof of the affair, but Marcus was right. It was only the beginning. An affair will embarrass him, but it won't destroy him, Marcus said, his brow furrowed in concentration as he stared at a laptop screen. Rich men have affairs all the time. It's a scandal for a week, then it's forgotten. We need to hit him where it hurts his business, his reputation as an untouchable titan. He explained his theory about the construction fraud his sister had uncovered. Julian's genius isn't just in building skyscrapers. It's in cutting corners where no one can see. He bribes inspectors, uses substandard materials, and inflates costs, pocketing the difference. The Thorne Sterling empire is a house of cards built on a rotten foundation. The challenge was proving it. The evidence his sister had was years old and purely anecdotal. They needed something concrete, something a prosecutor could sink their teeth into. There was a man, Amelia said, suddenly her mind racing back through years of forced smiles at company parties. David Chen. He was Julian's CFO for over a decade. He was quiet, meticulous, always looked terrified. Julian fired him about a year ago. He said David had made a massive accounting error, but the story never felt right. Julian was almost gleeful about it. He ruined him publicly. A disgruntled CFO is a gold mine if we can get him to talk, Marcus said, his eyes lighting up. Finding him is the first step. It took 2 days of painstaking work. Marcus used his skills in surveillance and digital tracking, while Amelia used her intimate knowledge of Julian's world. She remembered Julian once mocking David for buying a small cabin near the Catskills. Working from that scrap of information, Marcus cross-referenced public records and property deeds. They found him. David Chen was a shadow of his former self. They met him in a quiet diner an hour outside the city. He was thin and jittery, constantly looking over his shoulder. He was hesitant to speak, terrified of Julian's reach. "You don't understand," David whispered, stirring his coffee with a trembling hand. "Julian Thorne doesn't just fire people. He destroys them. He has connections everywhere. He can make a person disappear." Amelia leaned forward, her gaze soft but firm. "Mr. Chen, I understand your fear. Look at what he did to me. I am his wife, the mother of his unborn child, and he publicly branded me an adulterer and a liar to save his own skin. He has taken everything from me. We are not asking you to fight him alone. We are asking you to help us arm ourselves with the truth." She told him about Marcus's sister, about their growing file of evidence. Seeing the proof of the affair, seeing that they had a foundation to build on, seemed to bolster David's courage. "There are 2 sets of books," he finally admitted, his voice barely audible. "One for the shareholders, and the IRS clean and polished. And then there's the real ledger." Julian called it the Oracle. It detailed everything: the kickbacks to city officials, the offshore accounts where he hid the profits from the inflated material costs, the blackmail files he kept on his business rivals. "Where is it?" Marcus asked, leaning in his voice urgent. "It's not a physical book. It's a server, a ghost server completely off the company network. He keeps it in a secure room hidden behind his office." David drew a small, crude map on a napkin. "The office has a false wall. Behind his massive oak bookshelf, it's pressure activated. You have to push the 3rd book from the left on the 2nd shelf, a first edition of The Great Gatsby." Very cliché. He explained that the server was protected by a multi-layered biometric security system, fingerprint retinal scan, and a complex rotating password known only to Julian. Getting to it would be impossible. Not impossible, Marcus said, a glint in his eye. Difficult. The plan began to form. It was audacious, dangerous, and hinged on 1,000 things going right. They would need to get Marcus inside Thorne's Sterling Tower after hours. They would need to bypass the building's formidable security, get into Julian's penthouse office, and somehow crack a system designed to be uncrackable. Amelia's role was crucial. She was the one who knew Julian's habits, his routines, his psychology. "He has a tell for his passwords," she recalled. "They're always related to his own mythology. His first company's founding date, his father's name, the name of his first boat. But there's always a twist, a symbol, a number that's personally significant." She remembered a small gold locket Julian always wore, a gift from his estranged mother. He claimed to despise her, but he never took it off. She had only seen inside it once. It didn't contain a picture, but a tiny folded piece of paper with a date on it. The day his father had lost the family's original fortune, the failure Julian had spent his entire life trying to erase and avenge. "That's it," Amelia whispered, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. "That's the key. The date of his greatest shame. That will be part of the password." They had the location. They had a potential key. Now they just needed the opportunity. And Julian, in his infinite arrogance, was about to give them one. Marcus pulled up a news alert on his phone. In 1 week, Thorne Sterling Properties would be holding a massive press conference to announce their new flagship project, the Thorne Spire. For 3 hours, Julian Thorne and his entire executive team would be across town, basking in the glow of the media spotlight. The building would be nearly empty. It was their only shot. The week leading up to the press conference was the most intense of Amelia's life. The drab hotel room buzzed with a nervous, focused energy. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach, but it was now overshadowed by a powerful sense of purpose. She was no longer just a victim reacting to Julian's cruelty. She was an active participant in his downfall. She was becoming the architect of his fall. Her role shifted from providing information to becoming a strategist, while Marcus, using a network of ex-military contacts, procured the sophisticated equipment they would need: a fingerprint cloner, a miniature camera, a device to bypass electronic locks. Amelia focused on the human element. "Just getting the data from the server isn't enough," she argued one evening, pacing the small room. "Julian's lawyers will tie it up in court for years. They'll claim it was fabricated, that we hacked him illegally. By the time it's sorted out, he'll have moved his assets and disappeared. We need to detonate this in a way he can't escape. We need a court of public opinion, and we need the real courts to act simultaneously." She thought about the people Julian had crossed, the enemies he had made with his ruthless climb to the top. Her mind settled on one name: Rachel Chen, a tenacious investigative journalist at the Financial Chronicle. 2 years ago, Chen had written a mildly critical piece about Thorne Sterling's labor practices. In retaliation, Julian had used his influence to try and get her fired, smearing her reputation among her peers. She had survived the attack, but Amelia knew she wouldn't have forgotten it. After hours of searching, Amelia found a personal email address for her. She drafted the message with painstaking care, making it anonymous, but compelling. Subject: the real foundation of Thorne Sterling Properties. Ms. Chen, you once wrote about the cracks in Julian Thorne's empusor. I can provide you with proof that the entire structure is fraudulent. This goes far beyond labor disputes. It involves massive financial fraud, bribery, and blackmail. I have access to irrefutable evidence, but I need a journalist with the courage to publish it at the exact right moment. If you are interested in the biggest financial story of the year, be ready. She sent it from a secure encrypted email service, leaving no trace back to her. Within an hour, a one-word reply came back: ready. The next piece of the puzzle was the legal system. They couldn't just walk into a police station. Julian had connections in the NYPD and the DA's office. They needed to go higher, to a federal level where his influence was weaker. Marcus had a contact from his time in the army, a man who now worked in the FBI's white-collar crime division in New York. Agent Miller. Marcus made the call. He was cautious, speaking in hypotheticals. He explained he had a source with potential access to a server containing evidence of massive wire fraud, racketeering, and public corruption connected to a major real estate developer. He didn't use Julian's name, but he didn't have to. Agent Miller was intrigued but skeptical. Get me the data, something I can verify, and I can get you a warrant. But it has to be solid. I can't move on a rumor. The plan was now a three-pronged attack. Marcus would execute the physical infiltration to retrieve the data from the Oracle. Amelia would coordinate the timing with Rachel Chen and a top-tier divorce lawyer. She had found a woman known for taking on powerful men. Eleanor Vance, no relation to Marcus, a coincidence that felt like fate. And Agent Miller of the FBI stood ready to act the moment they had the proof. The night before the press conference, the weight of what they were about to do settled upon them. "Are you sure about this?" Amelia Marcus asked, his voice unusually gentle. "Once we start this, there's no turning back. His wrath will be unimaginable." Amelia placed a hand on her stomach, where Oliver was kicking gently. She thought of the son she was carrying, the life she wanted for him. A life free from the poison of Julian's legacy. A life of integrity and truth. She looked at Marcus, her ally, her friend, the only person who had stood by her. "He didn't just shame me, Marcus," she said, her voice clear and steady. "He tried to erase me. He tried to define my son before he could even take his first breath. This isn't about revenge anymore. It's about reclamation. I'm taking back my name, my story, and my son's future." Her transformation was complete. The timid, heartbroken woman who had fled the gala was gone. In her place stood a woman of iron resolve, a strategist who had learned to wield her intimate knowledge of her enemy as a weapon. Julian had once told her that perception was everything. He was about to find out how perception could be turned against him with devastating force. Tomorrow they wouldn't just be exposing a man. They would be orchestrating the spectacular collapse of an empire. The day of the reckoning began with the oppressive stillness of a held breath. The city outside the hotel window was a muted grey, the sky thick with clouds that seemed to mirror the weight in Amelia's chest. The press conference, Julian's grand coronation for his new spire, was scheduled for 2 p.m. in their Spartan hotel room, which had become both a sanctuary and a war room. Every minute stretched into an eternity. Amelia sat at the small desk, a laptop open to a secure video feed from Marcus's body cam, and 3 burner phones lined up in a neat row, one for Marcus, one for her lawyer, Eleanor Vance, and one for the journalist, Rachel Chen. She was the mission controller, the unseen hand about to topple a king. Marcus stood by the door, already changed into the nondescript grey janitorial uniform. He looked out of place, a soldier forced into camouflage. He went over the plan with her one last time, his voice a low, steady murmur that did little to calm the frantic fluttering in her own stomach. "Comms check," he said, tapping the tiny receiver in his ear. "I hear you perfectly," Amelia replied, her voice surprisingly steady. "Video feed is clear. Remember the contingency plan. If you get any resistance, if there's an unexpected security sweep, you abort. You dump the gear and walk away. Your safety is the priority, Marcus." He met her gaze, his eyes dark with understanding. "We don't get a second chance at this, Amelia. It's now or never." He was right. This was a single, desperate shot in the dark. He picked up the janitor's cart, its contents meticulously arranged to conceal the high-tech tools of their trade beneath dirty rags and cleaning supplies. He gave her a single sharp nod, a silent acknowledgement of the immense trust between them. And then he was gone. Amelia's eyes darted to the laptop screen. The image was shaky, as Marcus moved through the hotel's service corridors and out into the city. She watched his journey in real time, a silent observer to the most dangerous moments of his life. 20 blocks away, a different kind of performance was beginning. A local news channel was broadcasting live from outside the venue for the press conference. She saw Julian's Bentley pull up a sleek black shark in a sea of media. He emerged looking radiant, powerful, invincible. He waved to the crowd, his smile as bright and false as a stage light. At 1:45 p.m., Marcus's voice crackled in her ear. "I'm at the service entrance of the tower. Going dark for entry." The video feed momentarily cut out as he navigated the initial security checkpoint. Amelia held her breath, counting the seconds. She saw him bluff his way past a bored-looking guard with a familiar nod and a complaint about a backed-up sink on the 45th floor. The guard waved him through without a second glance. He was in. The feed flickered back to life, showing the sterile, concrete guts of the building. "I'm heading for the executive elevator shaft," he whispered, his footsteps echoing in the corridor. "The building is a ghost town, just as we planned." Amelia watched her hand hovering over the mouse, as if she could somehow reach through the screen and help him. She saw him pry open the elevator maintenance panel, his movements economical and precise. He attached a magnetic ascender to the main cable and began his journey up the dark, greasy shaft, the only light coming from the small headlamp on his forehead. The view on her screen was a dizzying, claustrophobic ascent through the building's very spine. Meanwhile, Julian Thorne had taken the stage. He was bathed in the warm glow of spotlights, a confident smile on his face as he looked out over the assembled press. "Innovation," he began, his voice booming through the auditorium, "is not just about building higher. It's about building smarter. It's about building with integrity." Amelia scoffed a bitter sound in the quiet hotel room. "I'm on the penthouse floor." Marcus's voice cut through Julian's speech. The video feed stabilized, showing the plush, silent corridor leading to Julian's office. Every footstep on the thick carpet sounded like a drumbeat in Amelia's ears. He reached the massive oak doors of the office, the first real obstacle. He pulled out a sophisticated tension tool and an electronic pick. The silence was absolute, broken only by the faint, rhythmic clicks of the tumblers in the lock. It was a heart-stopping minute, an intricate dance between metal and nerve. Then a soft final click. He was inside. "I'm in the office," he confirmed. The camera panned across the room, a monument to Julian's ego. The panoramic view of the city, the oversized desk, the smell of leather and power that Amelia imagined still lingered in the air. Marcus didn't waste a second. He went straight to the massive bookshelf, his fingers tracing the spines of the leather-bound classics. He found it the first edition of The Great Gatsby. He pushed. For a horrifying moment, nothing happened. He pushed again, harder this time, and a section of the wall slid back with a low, grinding hiss that sounded deafeningly loud. Behind it was the steel door and the cold, unforgiving biometric panel. "First hurdle." Marcus murmured more to himself than to her. He pulled out the thin silicone replica of Julian's fingerprint. He took a deep breath, pressing it carefully against the glass scanner. A red light flashed. "Access denied." Amelia's heart plummeted. "Try again," she urged, her voice a strained whisper. "Wipe it. The smallest amount of moisture or dust can interfere." Marcus methodically wiped the scanner and the silicone print. He repositioned it, pressing down with steady, even pressure. The red light flickered, and then turned a solid, beautiful green. A wave of relief washed over Amelia, so intense It left her dizzy. Next was the retinal scanner. Marcus held up the small, high-definition device, displaying the image they had painstakingly extracted. He aligned it with the scanner. Again, the red light of rejection flashed twice before the system finally accepted the data, bathing the small hidden room in green. Only the password remained. The final gate. "Password prompt is up," Marcus said. 20 characters, letters, numbers, and symbols. I'm ready when you are, Amelia." On the TV, Julian was nearing the crescendo of his speech. The Thorne spire will be a symbol of this city's resilience, its power, and its unwavering vision for the future. "Now, Marcus." Amelia commanded her voice, finding a sudden strength. She recited the password, the key she had forged from the pieces of her broken marriage and Julian's hidden shame. Capital TSPF hyphen 08141988 hyphen capital INV CTUS hyphen capital A. She watched Marcus's fingers fly across the keypad. He hit the enter key. For 3 seconds that felt like 3 years. The screen was blank. Then in bold green letters, "Access granted." The heavy steel door unlatched with a solid, satisfying thud. Inside was the nerve center of Julian's corrupt empire. Racks of servers blinked with cold blue lights. The Oracle Marcus breathed. He plugged in the high-speed drive, and a small window appeared on his wrist-mounted monitor, transferring data. A progress bar began its slow crawl from left to right. It would take 10 minutes. 10 minutes where they were utterly exposed. 5 minutes in Julian's triumphant speech was interrupted. The phone on his podium, his direct line to his head of security, buzzed insistently. He glanced at it, a flicker of pure annoyance crossing his face. He was in the middle of his masterpiece. He silenced the call and continued. "Copy is at 50%. Marcus reported. His head snapped up. The video feed jiggled. "I hear an elevator," he whispered. It's dinged on the floor below. Amelia's blood ran cold. Is it coming up? I don't know. Holding my position. Staying silent. The seconds ticked by. No footsteps. No voices. It must have been for another floor. A false alarm that had aged Amelia by a decade. At the press conference, the security chief's phone buzzed again this time, with a frantic, vibrating intensity. Julian's smile tightened into a snarl. He declined the call again, his arrogance overriding the clear sign of an emergency. He would not be interrupted. 80%, Marcus said. The progress bar crept towards its destination. 95%, 99%. Transfer complete. Copy complete. I have it. Marcus whispered, a new urgency in his voice. I'm out. He ripped the drive from the port, slapped it into a shock-proof case, and slid the secret door shut. He reset the bookshelf, his movements a blur. He exited the office, re-engaged the lock, and began his swift, silent retreat. He's clear of the office, Amelia said into the phone to her lawyer, her voice trembling with adrenaline. He's on his way out of the building. Do it. Light the match. Eleanor Vance's calm voice responded, Consider it lit. Simultaneously, Amelia sent the encrypted one-word message to Rachel Chen. Now. At the press conference, Julian Thorne was taking his final bow to thunderous applause. It was in that exact moment of supreme triumph that the world he knew ended. 100 phones in the auditorium buzzed and chirped in near unison. A low murmur rippled through the press corps as they looked down at their screens. The murmur grew into a wave of shocked gasps. The headline from the Financial Chronicle, penned by Rachel Chen, was a digital bombshell: the House of Thorne, an empire of fraud. Secret ledgers revealed decades of bribery, kickbacks, and corruption. The story was a breathtaking exposé, complete with scanned documents from the server showing illegal wire transfers, damning email chains with city officials, and internal accounting that detailed the staggering scope of his crimes. Julian's smile faltered. He could see the change in the room, feel the shift in the atmosphere from adoration to a bloodthirsty frenzy. His PR head, a woman named Clara, rushed onto the stage, her face ashen, and showed him her phone. The color drained from Julian's face. He stared out at the sea of reporters, their faces no longer friendly, their cameras and phones now pointed at him like a firing squad. These are outrageous lies. Fabricated documents, he stammered, his voice losing its confident baritone, becoming thin and reedy. This is a malicious attack by my competitors. But the denial was weak, pathetic. It was then that two men in dark, immaculate suits appeared at the side of the stage. They moved with a calm, deliberate purpose that cut through the rising chaos. It was FBI agent Miller and his partner. They walked directly to the podium, their expressions grim. Julian Thorne. Agent Miller said, his voice amplified by the still active microphone, ringing out with cold authority. You are under arrest for wire fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy to commit bribery. The room exploded. A blinding wall of camera flashes erupted as the agents efficiently moved Julian's hands behind his back and secured them with handcuffs. The click of the cuffs was a sound of absolute finality. The Titan, the king of the city, was being led off his own stage in disgrace. In her hotel room, Amelia watched it all unfold. She didn't cheer. She didn't cry. She felt a profound, bone-deep sense of release, as if a poison she'd been carrying for years had finally been purged from her system. The storm she had unleashed had finally broken. Her phone rang an unknown number. She knew instinctively who it was. She answered, holding the phone to her ear. You, the voice on the other end snarled. It was Julian from the back of a police car, his voice a venomous rasp of pure hatred. This was you. I don't know how, but you did this. You will rot for this, you bitch. You and that bastard child of yours will have nothing. Amelia stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the skyline he had once owned. She placed a hand on her belly, feeling the gentle, reassuring kick of her son. She was not the same woman who had crumpled on a bench in a lavender gown. That woman was gone forever. No, Julian, she said, her voice a blade of ice and calm. You were wrong. It isn't about perception. It's about truth. And the truth is, you have nothing. You built your entire life on lies, and now they have buried you. You are the one who will rot. She paused, savoring the finality. As for me and my son, we are finally free. Before he could respond, she ended the call. The click was as definitive as the sound of his handcuffs. She had not only taken back her name and her story, she had taken back the future. Julian Thorne was convicted on multiple federal charges, his empire dismantled, and his assets seized to pay back decades of fraud. Isabella Rossi, facing her own charges, cooperated with prosecutors for a reduced sentence. And Amelia. She won the largest divorce settlement in state history, but she didn't keep a dime for herself. She put it all into a trust for her son Oliver, and established a foundation to help women legally fight back against powerful and abusive partners. She moved out of the city, reclaiming her career as an art curator, and more importantly, reclaiming her life. Her story serves as a powerful reminder that the truth is a light that can never be fully extinguished, and that courage can be found in the most unexpected alliances. It shows that even when you lose everything, you can build something stronger and more real in its place. Thank you for joining us for this incredible story. If you were moved by Amelia's journey, please hit the like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life dramas. Your support helps us continue to tell these important stories. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.